It should have been a dream come true. Instead, it cost me everything. I lost my chance to attend an Ivy League university. I lost my future. I even lost myself. The cruelest part was that Alexander was the one who had lost control that night. He was the one who had pulled me into his arms, held me close until dawn, and refused to let me go. Yet on our wedding night, he looked at me as though I disgusted him. "Stella Morgan," he spat coldly, his eyes filled with nothing but contempt. "You shamelessly trapped me into this marriage. Don't ever touch me again for the rest of your life." That single sentence shattered every illusion I had. From that day forward, he made my life a living hell. Every insult, every humiliation, every calculated act of cruelty was designed to remind me that I was nothing more than a burden he despised. Then came the greatest tragedy of all. Without my knowledge or consent, he took our daughter's heart and transplanted it into the daughter of his first love. While he celebrated the operation's success with the woman he had always cherished, I wandered alone toward Rose Hill Cemetery, clutching the tiny urn that held my daughter's ashes. I never made it there. Death claimed me before I could even say goodbye. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to that absurd, unforgettable night. The sharp ache throughout my body felt as though I'd been crushed beneath a speeding truck. Every muscle screamed in protest. The crumpled sheets, the torn clothing scattered across the floor, and the lingering scent of alcohol confirmed what my pounding heart already knew. I had been reborn. My breathing hitched as I slowly turned my head. Alexander Vance lay asleep beside me. For one frozen moment, my heart stopped beating. Then instinct took over. I carefully climbed out of bed, every movement sending fresh pain through my trembling legs. Ignoring the soreness, I gathered my ripped clothes from the floor, dressed as quietly as possible, and limped toward the open window. The front door was out of the question. If I wanted to escape my fate, I had to disappear before Alexander woke up. I had one leg over the windowsill when a deep, sleepy voice suddenly echoed behind me. "What are you doing?" I nearly screamed. Startled, my already weakened legs gave out beneath me. I slipped. The world spun as I tumbled from the second floor, landing hard on the grass below. Pain exploded through my ankle, but I forced myself back onto my feet without looking back. By the time Alexander rushed to the window, shirtless and calling after me, I was already limping down the street as fast as I could. I thought I had escaped. I was wrong. The next morning, every major entertainment headline was flooded with blurry paparazzi photos. Even though I hadn't walked through the front entrance, someone had still captured me fleeing through the window. My torn dress only fueled the public's imagination. Unlike my previous life, however, the headlines were completely different. Instead of gossiping that the Vance family's young heir had spent a scandalous night with a girl next door, the internet exploded with a far more ridiculous story. The Vance family's golden prince was seduced by a mysterious beauty who escaped immediately afterward. Even more outrageous was the photograph accompanying the article. Alexander stood at the bedroom window with one arm stretched toward me, his expression dark and frustrated, as though he desperately wanted me to stay. Looking at that picture, I nearly choked on my own frustration. Seriously? I had practically broken my ankle escaping him because I wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. Shouldn't he have been celebrating my departure? Instead, that one photograph had convinced millions of people that he couldn't bear to let me leave. The comments online became increasingly ridiculous. Who is she? How amazing must she be to leave Alexander Vance wanting more? I've never seen him look at anyone like that. I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly hurt. Wanting more? Please. If anyone knew Alexander's true feelings, it was me. He hated me more than anyone in the world. Massaging my swollen ankle with an ice pack, I opened my social media account and began deleting every single post I'd ever made about him. There were tens of thousands. Every hidden confession. Every blurry photo I'd secretly taken. Every diary-like post documenting my hopeless crush. In my previous life, I had treasured every one of them. On our wedding night, I had even wrapped them into a scrapbook and shyly presented it as a surprise. Alexander barely glanced at it before laughing coldly. "Stella," he sneered, "you're shameless. You've been lusting after your uncle who's 7 years older than you since you were a little girl." Back then, I had stubbornly defended myself. We're not related by blood. 7 years isn't even a big age gap. Plenty of couples have much bigger differences. His face instantly darkened. Without another word, he slammed the door behind him and disappeared into the night. Later, I learned that he had gone straight to an exclusive nightclub where he paid for 100 beautiful women to accompany him until morning. That was his answer to our wedding. Everyone laughed at me. The orphan girl who had forced her way into the prestigious Vance family. The wife abandoned on the very first night of her marriage. Even then, I still comforted myself. At least I was carrying his child. Surely, once our baby was born, things would change. Surely, time would soften his heart. I couldn't have been more foolish. From the day we married, Alexander brought a different woman home almost every night. He looked down on every one of them with icy indifference, yet he deliberately forced me to serve them. Those women understood exactly what pleased the man paying them. Humiliating me became their favorite game. They ordered me onto all fours, made me bark like a dog, forced me to lick spilled milk from the floor. Even while heavily pregnant, they laughed as they made me perform degrading dances, knowing full well that I would endure anything to protect the tiny life growing inside me. One evening, Alexander crouched before me, his cold smile more terrifying than any shout. "Stella," he said softly, almost casually. "Do you know something?" He rested a hand against my swollen stomach. "I have 10,000 ways to make the child inside you disappear without anyone ever knowing." His smile widened. "So, if I were you, I'd learn to be obedient. Maybe," Alexander had once said with an indifferent shrug, "if I'm in a good mood, I'll spare the child a few glances after it's born." Those words had haunted me for years. Back then, I had even considered ending the pregnancy myself. I punched my own stomach until my fists turned numb. I deliberately jumped from high places. I threw myself down staircases while hiking in the mountains. Every desperate attempt left me bruised and bleeding. Yet the little life inside me refused to give up. She clung stubbornly to life. Even the women Alexander brought home often found excuses to attack me. They shoved me, kicked me, and tried more than once to make me miscarry. Every time I ended up covered in injuries. But my daughter remained perfectly safe. The worst incident happened when I suffered days of continuous spotting. The sight of blood terrified Mrs. Vance. For the first time since my marriage, the Vance mansion was thrown into complete chaos. She summoned specialists from across the country, inviting hundreds of renowned doctors to examine me, terrified that something had happened to the precious grandchild she had longed for. After countless examinations, every doctor reached the same conclusion. The baby is exceptionally healthy. Hearing those words, I finally allowed myself to cry in relief. If Alexander refused to love our daughter, then I would love her enough for both of us. That was enough. At least that's what I believed. But fate proved far crueler than I could have imagined. After surviving every danger inside my womb, after overcoming every attempt to steal her life before birth, my daughter ultimately died by her own father's hands. The memory hit me like a blade, piercing straight through my chest. My fingers trembled. Without hesitation, I permanently deleted every remaining post about Alexander from my social media account. One after another. Thousands of memories vanished. When the last post disappeared, I carried my old diary into the backyard. The pages were filled with childish admiration, secret dreams, and countless confessions I had never dared to say aloud. I struck a match. The flames quickly swallowed every handwritten word. I stood there until the final scrap of paper crumbled into ashes. Just like that, every trace of my love for Alexander Vance disappeared forever. As for the child who had not yet been conceived in this life, I refused to let her suffer that same tragic fate again. This time, I would never allow her to come into this world. I grabbed my bag, intending to leave and buy medicine. Before I could reach the doorbell rang. So soon, the Vance family had arrived much earlier than they had in my previous life. It seemed destiny was determined to catch up with me. Taking a slow breath, I opened the door. Standing outside wasn't Mrs. Vance. It was Victoria Vance. The moment she saw me, she didn't waste a single second. Slap. Her palm struck my cheek with enough force to send my head snapping sideways. A burning pain spread across my face, and I tasted blood at the corner of my lips. "You ungrateful little brat," Victoria shouted. "My brother pitted you after your father's death and took you into the Vance family. Is this how you repay his kindness?" I slowly wiped the blood from my lip before looking back at her. "Auntie," I said quietly. "Have you misunderstood something?" The word left my mouth almost automatically. Victoria froze. Before that drunken night with Alexander, he had always treated me with remarkable kindness. In fact, He had cared for me so well over the years that Victoria often complained he spoiled me more than his own relatives. Ever since I realized my feelings for Alexander, however, I had stubbornly refused to call him uncle. Naturally, I had stopped calling Victoria Auntie as well. So hearing that respectful title again completely caught her off guard. Confusion flashed across her face before she quickly recovered. She pulled out a newspaper and threw it directly at me. The front page displayed the now infamous paparazzi photograph. So the sun really has risen in the west, she sneered. Calling me Auntie won't fool me. Other people may not recognize that blurry figure, but I know it's you. Her gaze turned sharp. Listen carefully, Stella. Put away those ridiculous fantasies. The Vance family isn't a place someone like you can marry into. Even if you kneel and call me Auntie every day, I'll never allow you to become my sister-in-law. I lowered my eyes. For once, Victoria wasn't wrong. The Vance family had never been a place where I belonged. Years ago, my father had once saved Alexander's life. After my father passed away, Alexander honored that debt of gratitude by becoming my legal guardian. Despite being only 7 years older than me, he took care of me with unbelievable patience. He celebrated every birthday, remembered every exam, encouraged every dream. Sometimes, he treated me even better than he treated Victoria herself. How could a lonely orphan girl not mistake that warmth for love? If that drunken night had never happened, I would have buried those feelings forever and remained nothing more than his grateful niece. Picking up the newspaper from the floor, I glanced at the photograph before casually handing it back. The paparazzi make up stories every day just to sell headlines, I said with a faint smile. Surely you aren't planning to believe gossip magazines too? In my previous life, everything had been different. Alexander and I had walked out of the hotel together. The bruises on my neck, the bite marks on his shoulders. Every intimate detail had been photographed clearly. Since Alexander had never shown interest in any woman before, the scandal immediately shook the entire Vance family. Mrs. Vance, desperate to see him settle down, insisted he marry me. Alexander refused, without hesitation. Only after I discovered I was pregnant, just before starting university, did Mrs. Vance force him into the marriage for the sake of her future grandchild. Back then, I had been unbelievably foolish. I willingly abandoned my lifelong dream of attending an Ivy League university. I gave up everything just to marry the man I loved and give birth to what I believed was the symbol of our love. Looking back now, I wanted nothing more than to laugh at my younger self. This time, however, things were different. The paparazzi had only captured a blurry side profile. The only suspicious detail was my torn dress. Without proof that Alexander had torn it, no one could force me to admit anything. Victoria studied my calm expression, uncertainty slowly creeping into her eyes. So you're saying, she asked slowly, nothing happened between you and my brother? I met her gaze, without flinching. What exactly do you think should have happened between us? She immediately exploded. Don't play innocent, she snapped. Then explain this. Why were you staying in the same hotel? Why was my brother covered in scratches? And how did your dress end up torn? I nearly smiled. Victoria wasn't completely foolish, just not quite clever enough. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a familiar tall figure approaching. Alexander. My heartbeat remained perfectly steady. I simply shrugged. It was my birthday last night. It was my birthday last night. I continued calmly. Isn't it normal for someone to celebrate, get a little too drunk, and rent a hotel room? I tilted my head with an innocent smile. And if I got excited after being accepted into an Ivy League university and accidentally ruined my dress while fooling around, isn't that perfectly reasonable too? My gaze shifted toward Alexander. As for why Uncle happened to stay at the same hotel, I spread my hands helplessly. You'll have to ask him. How would I know where he chooses to spend his nights? I paused deliberately before adding with a serious expression. Besides, it's summer. Mosquitoes are everywhere. A few bites on someone's neck or body aren't exactly unusual. Then I looked back at Victoria, raising an eyebrow. Auntie, why are you always imagining such scandalous things? You really should stop watching those trashy adult dramas. Finally, I smiled politely at Alexander. Uncle, don't you agree? Alexander had remained silent the entire time, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. His expression was unreadable. Those dark eyes, as deep as a bottomless lake, rested quietly on me, as though trying to uncover something hidden beneath every word I spoke. For a long moment he said nothing. Victoria frowned and turned toward him. Brother, is what she's saying true? She asked suspiciously. Because those marks on your neck don't look like mosquito bites to me. She reached toward him, trying to inspect the reddish marks more closely, clearly determined to find proof that something improper had happened between us. Instead of answering her question, Alexander's gaze drifted to my face. His eyes stopped on the bright red fingerprint marks still visible across my swollen cheek. His expression instantly darkened. You hit her? Victoria's hand froze in midair. She looked unexpectedly guilty. I only wanted to teach her a lesson, she explained awkwardly. She caused you to become the laughingstock of the internet overnight. What if people really believed she slept with you and then ran away? Where would the Vance family's reputation be? I was simply warning her not to overstep her place. Alexander's face remained ice cold. Victoria. His voice carried quiet authority. Have you forgotten the manners expected of a daughter of the Vance family? Victoria lowered her head. As punishment, you're confined to the house for the next 3 days. What? She stared at him in disbelief. Brother. Alexander ignored her protests completely. Watching the siblings, I couldn't help feeling amused. In my previous life, I had exhausted myself trying to earn Victoria's approval. Now, I no longer cared. Since I had already decided to sever every connection with the Vance family, there was no reason to keep pretending. Unable to resist, I gave Victoria a small, mocking smile. Auntie, I said sweetly, do you really think someone like me could force Uncle into anything? I shrugged innocently. I don't exactly have the ability to overpower him. Then, unable to stop myself, I added with a teasing smile. If something really happened, I honestly don't know who would have taken advantage of whom. Victoria's face turned an ugly shade of red. Even Alexander's brows lifted slightly. His fingers casually brushed the faint bite mark near his neck before he suddenly looked directly at me. So, he asked slowly, it wasn't you? His words made my heart skip. I frowned. What did he mean by that? I hadn't drugged him. I hadn't thrown myself at him. I hadn't even wanted to stay in that room. Now I was doing everything possible to distance myself from what had happened. Yet instead of helping me clear things up, he seemed determined to drag me back into the center of the scandal. Forcing a smile, I lowered my eyes respectfully. Uncle, you're joking. I wouldn't dare bully you. Even if you gave me 100 lives, I'd never have that kind of courage. Those words weren't merely an excuse. They were the truth. After everything that had happened in my previous life, after losing my daughter, after dying alone, the only thing I wanted now was to stay as far away from Alexander Vance as humanly possible. Victoria narrowed her eyes, her suspicious gaze bouncing between us. Something's wrong. You too are acting strange. Almost instinctively, Alexander and I answered at exactly the same time. No. The synchronized response stunned everyone. Even Alexander seemed surprised. For a brief second, astonishment flashed across his usually calm face before it disappeared as quickly as it had come. An awkward silence followed. I chose not to linger any longer. Ignoring the throbbing pain in my ankle, I turned and limped toward the gate. I had barely taken 2 steps when a warm hand suddenly wrapped around my wrist. You're going to the hospital. Alexander's voice left no room for argument. The familiar touch sent a violent shiver through my body. Almost instinctively, I yanked my arm away. Don't touch me. The words escaped much harsher than I intended. Alexander's eyes flickered slightly. Before I could react, he bent down without warning and effortlessly lifted me into his arms. What are you doing? I gasped, completely caught off guard. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief. Brother. Ignoring both of us, Alexander carried me toward his car, as though I weighed nothing. Panic surged through me. I struggled desperately, kicking and pushing against his chest. When none of it worked, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. Smack. The crisp sound echoed through the quiet courtyard. Victoria froze. Even the nearby servants looked stunned. A faint red handprint slowly appeared on Alexander's cheek. I expected him to lose his temper. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, nor was it one of amusement. It was the exact same faint, unreadable smile he had worn after that absurd night in my previous life, a smile filled with mockery and thoughts I could never understand. Without saying another word, he tightened his hold and continued walking toward the waiting car. My heartbeat became increasingly frantic. Not because I was flustered by being held so intimately, but because everything was unfolding differently from my memories. Completely differently. Alexander knew perfectly well that I had been the woman with him that night. So, why wasn't he exposing me? Why wasn't he pushing me away like he had before? Why was he refusing to let me leave? A terrifying possibility suddenly surfaced in my mind. Could it be? Had Alexander also been reborn? The thought sounded utterly impossible. And yet, if he truly remembered our previous life, then why would he willingly come anywhere near me? The leather seats of Alexander's car smelled exactly as they had in my previous life, a